My family mocked me for taking a worthless job, and said, "You'll never be rich." I just smiled and left. Last night, they saw me on TV and their faces went pale. I still remember the way they laughed. The way my father leaned back in his chair at the dinner table, shaking his head like I was some naive child who didn't understand the world. My mother, trying to stifle her smirk behind a sip of wine. My older brother, Derek, who had followed the path they wanted, business degree, cushy corporate job, company car, smirking at me like I was the family fool. "You really think that's a career?" my father had said, setting his fork down with exaggerated patience. "You'll be broke before you turn 30. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled. Because deep down, I already knew they would never believe in me. So I left. Not just the dinner table, but their house, their expectations, their world. I packed my things that night, stuffed my car with everything I owned, and drove off without looking back. I wasn't sure where I was going. I just knew I had to go. The first few weeks after I left felt like freedom. No more judgmental stares from across the dinner table. No more snide remarks about how I was throwing my future away. Just me, my car, and a head full of dreams. But reality hit fast. I had no safety net, no wealthy parents to fall back on, no family support. I spent my first nights in a tiny, barely livable studio apartment with a mattress on the floor and a leaky faucet. My bank account was thinning faster than I expected, and I had to stretch every dollar just to get by. And then came the failures. The first job I landed in my field? Gone within months. The company downsized, and I was the first to go. The second? It barely paid enough to cover rent. I called home once. Just once. Not for money, never for money, but maybe just to hear something familiar. My mother picked up, and before I could even get a word in, she sighed. "So, are you finally ready to come home and get a real job?" I hung up. No. I wasn't going back. I was going to prove them wrong. There's a moment in every struggle when you start to wonder if everyone else was right. For me, that moment came one cold November night, sitting alone in my car because I couldn't afford the heating bill. My so-called career wasn't taking off the way I had dreamed. No big breaks, no major successes, just rejection after rejection. I had worked 3 part-time jobs that month just to keep myself afloat. One at a coffee shop, one as a late-night security guard, and one doing freelance work that barely paid enough to cover groceries. I was exhausted, mentally and physically. And then, the final blow. An opportunity one had poured months into fell through. I had pinned all my hopes on it, convinced that this was going to be my turning point. Instead, the email came through at 10:42 p.m. A cold, impersonal rejection. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking. Was this it? Had I made the biggest mistake of my life? I thought about calling my family. Admitting defeat. Accepting whatever desk job they wanted me to take. But then I remembered their laughter. The way they had written me off without a second thought. No. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and opened my laptop. If one door closed, I would build a new one myself. And that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just survive. I was going to succeed. That night in my freezing apartment, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to quit. But success didn't come overnight. I failed. Over and over again. For every opportunity one chased, 10 rejections followed. Every time I thought I was finally making progress, something knocked me back down. There were days when my stomach growled from skipping meals, nights when I stared at my ceiling wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. But I kept going. I threw myself into my work, learning from every failure, pushing through every disappointment. I took jobs nobody else wanted just to get my foot in the door. I worked for free at times, just to gain experience and connections. I slept less. Worked harder. Kept improving. And slowly, things started to change. The first real breakthrough came almost by accident. A small-time gig I had taken, one I had barely even thought twice about, suddenly led to a bigger opportunity. Someone noticed my work. Someone took a chance on me. And from there, things started to pick up. One gig led to another. A small success turned into a bigger one. The connections I had struggled to make for years finally started paying off. I didn't get rich overnight. I didn't wake up one morning to find myself famous or wildly successful. But little by little, I was making a name for myself. And my family? They never checked in. Not once. I saw them post about my brother's promotions, my cousin's weddings, their fancy vacations. But me? I was still the black sheep, the one they had written off long ago. And that was fine. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought anymore. I had something better. I had proof that I was right all along. Success sneaks up on you. One day, you're struggling, barely scraping by. The next, you look around and realize you've built something real. For me, that moment came the night I got the call. It was from a producer, someone I had met years ago during one of my lowest points, back when I was working for pennies just to get my name out there. I had almost forgotten about them. But they hadn't forgotten about me. They had seen my latest work and wanted to feature me. Not just in a small segment, not just as a background name, this was big. A national television special. An interview. A moment in the spotlight I had been chasing for years. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, barely breathing as I listened to the details. When the call ended, I just stared at the screen, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The years of struggle. The nights spent doubting myself. The laughter of my family ringing in my ears. And now? Now, the world was about to know my name. The interview aired a few weeks later. I didn't tell my family. I didn't reach out or send them a message. They had made it clear years ago that they didn't care what I was doing. But fate had a way of making sure they found out. That night, while they were sitting in their comfortable home, watching TV like any other evening, I appeared on the screen. Not in the background. Not as a footnote. Front and center. I spoke with confidence, with purpose, sharing my journey, my struggles, and the work that had brought me to this point. The host praised my dedication, calling me a rising star. They flashed my name across the screen in bold letters. I could only imagine the look on my parents' faces. The way my brother would shift uncomfortably in his seat. The way my mother's jaw would tighten, realizing that the son she had mocked had just accomplished something none of them ever had. And my father? For once in his life, he had no words. I wasn't there to see their reactions, but I didn't need to be. Because at that moment, I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I had already moved on. The night my interview aired, my phone stayed silent. No calls. No texts. Not from my parents. Not from my brother. Not from anyone in my family. I wasn't surprised. They had spent years dismissing me, belittling my dreams, telling me I'd never amount to anything. And now that I had, what could they possibly say? That they were wrong? That they regretted treating me the way they did? Of course not. Instead, they chose silence. But silence speaks louder than words. A few days later, I got a message. It wasn't from my parents, it was from my cousin, Jessica. She had always been one of the few in the family who didn't treat me like an embarrassment. "Hey, saw you on TV. That was incredible. You must be so proud of yourself. Congrats, you really deserve it." I stared at the message for a while before replying. "Thanks, Jess. It means a lot." Then, after a pause, she sent another message. "By the way, I was at Mom and Dad's the night it aired. Your parents saw it too. You should have seen their faces." I smirked. "Oh yeah?" Pale. Silent. Like they had just seen a ghost. I imagined the scene. My father gripping the armrest of his chair, my mother pressing her lips into a thin line, my brother shifting uncomfortably as my name flashed across the screen. For so many years, they had laughed at me. Now, the world was celebrating me. And they couldn't take that away. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I had spent too much of my life seeking their approval, craving their validation. And now that I had achieved everything they said I never would, I realized something. I didn't need them. I never had. This victory was mine, and mine alone. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, truly free. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. I had moved on. I had no interest in forcing a conversation that should have happened years ago. My success had come without their approval, without their encouragement, without their belief in me, and that was the greatest victory of all. But my family? They weren't done just yet. The first message came from my mother. "Hey, honey. We saw you on TV. You looked great. So proud of you." Proud. That word tasted bitter. Where was that pride when I was struggling? Where was it when I was scraping by, doubting myself, questioning if I had made the right choice? I didn't reply. Then came my father's message, shorter but even more ridiculous. "We should talk." Talk? About what? About how he had mocked me for years. About how he had laughed in my face when I told him about my dreams? I ignored that one too. For a few days it was quiet. But then, as if realizing their usual tactics wouldn't work, my brother tried a different approach. "Man, you're really blowing up. Saw your feature last night. That's crazy. Listen, I know we've had our differences, but maybe we should catch up. Let's grab dinner sometime, my treat." My treat. I almost laughed out loud. The same brother who once smirked at my ambition was now treating me like some old friend he wanted to reconnect with. I set my phone down and let out a slow breath. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They weren't reaching out because they felt guilty. They were reaching out because I was somebody now. Because my name meant something. Because people were watching me, celebrating me, praising the very career they had once mocked. They wanted a way back in, not to apologize, not to make things right, but to rewrite history. To pretend they had always been supportive. That they had always believed in me. And I wasn't going to let them. A week later, my mother called. I don't know why I answered. Maybe curiosity. Maybe I just wanted to hear what excuse she'd come up with. "Honey, it's been too long," she said, her voice warm and sweet, like nothing had ever happened. "How are you?" I leaned back in my chair, glancing out the window of my apartment, a high-rise with a view that stretched across the entire city. A place I had earned without them. "I'm good, Mom." "What's up?" She hesitated, as if surprised I wasn't jumping at the chance to reconnect. "Well, your father and I were thinking. We should all get together soon. Have a nice family dinner. We could celebrate your success." There it was. I could practically hear the subtext. "Now that you're successful, you're worth our time." I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "You want to celebrate?" "Of course." I took a slow breath. "Mom, do you remember the last time we had dinner together?" Silence. "I do," I continued. "It was the night Dad told me I'd be broke before I turned 30. The night you both laughed when I told you I wanted to follow my dreams. The night Derek smirked and called me an idiot for thinking I could make it. Honey, that was so long ago." "Not long enough." She exhaled, her voice softening. "Look, we were just trying to protect you. We didn't want you to struggle." I almost laughed. "You didn't protect me. You dismissed me. You belittled me. You pushed me away." She started to say something else, but I cut her off. "I don't need a family dinner. I don't need your congratulations. I don't need anything from you." A long pause. Then, softly, "That's not fair." I clenched my jaw. Fair? Where was fairness when I was alone in a freezing apartment, struggling to make ends meet? Where was fairness when they left me to fend for myself, waiting for me to fail just so they could say I told you so? But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I simply said, "Goodbye, Mom." And I hung up. I expected to feel anger. Or sadness. Or regret. But I didn't. I felt free. For the first time in my life, I had nothing left to prove to them. I had won. And I no longer needed them to see it. After that call, I waited. Waited for more messages, more calls, more attempts to reel me back in. But they never came. Just silence. And I realized something. Without my attention, without my participation, my family had nothing. Their opinions, their judgments, their arrogance, none of it mattered anymore. Because I had taken away the one thing they never thought I would. My presence. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I wasn't the struggling fool they could laugh at over dinner. I wasn't the lost son they could pity while propping up my brother as the successful one. Now I was the one the world was watching. And they had to sit in their quiet little house and accept the fact that I had done it without them. A few months passed. My career kept growing. Bigger projects, better connections, opportunities one had once only dreamed about. And then, one evening, something unexpected happened. I was at a formal event, a private gala celebrating some of the industry's top talents. The kind of place where the room buzzed with power and influence. I was shaking hands, talking with people I had once idolized, when a familiar voice called my name. I turned, and there he was. Derek. My brother. He was dressed in a suit, a drink in his hand, a cautious smile on his face. Man, he said, letting out a small laugh. I gotta admit, I didn't think you'd actually pull this off. I raised an eyebrow. And yet here we are. He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. Listen, I know things weren't always easy between us. But hey, we're family, right? There it was. The classic attempt to rewrite history. To act like the past didn't exist. I just looked at him. He shifted uncomfortably. Mom and Dad have been talking about you a lot. They keep saying they want to make things right. I smiled. That's funny. Because when I needed them, all they did was push me away. Derek exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Come on, man. Don't hold on to that stuff. You proved them wrong. You're successful now. So what's the harm in letting it go? I studied him for a long moment. And then I shook my head. You still don't get it, do you? He frowned. What do you mean? I took a slow breath, then met his eyes. This isn't about me proving them wrong. This isn't about revenge. It's about the fact that I don't need them anymore. Derek blinked. You really think you're better than us now? I chuckled, shaking my head. No. I just finally understand my worth. And I'm not wasting another second on people who only care about me when it benefits them. His expression hardened, but I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned, walking back into the crowd, back to the people who actually mattered. That was the last time I ever spoke to my family. And I haven't looked back since. That conversation with Derek should have left me angry. Or hurt. Or regretful. But it didn't. As I walked back into that gala, shaking hands with people who actually valued my work, I felt something I hadn't fully embraced before. Peace. For years I had chased their approval, hoping that one day they'd finally see my worth. That they'd be proud of me. That they'd recognize how much I had sacrificed to get here. But standing there, surrounded by people who respected me, not because they had to, not because they were related to me, but because I had earned it, I realized something. I never needed their approval. I never needed them. Months passed, and life kept moving forward. I traveled for work, met incredible people, built something I could truly be proud of. Every now and then, someone from my past would try to reach out, a distant cousin commenting on my success, an old family friend suddenly showing interest in what I was doing. Even my mother sent a short, hesitant email once. I hope you're doing well. Your father and I miss you. Maybe we can talk soon? I stared at it for a long time. For a brief moment I wondered, if I called, would they finally say the things I had always wanted to hear? Would they apologize? Would they admit they were wrong? But then I remembered. The only reason they wanted to talk now was because they had lost control. Because I had succeeded without them. If I had failed, if I had crawled back home asking for help, they would have said, "We told you so." They would have smiled, patted themselves on the back, and felt satisfied that they had been right all along. I didn't need that kind of family. I didn't need a forced, awkward conversation where they pretended to care now that I was successful. So, I did the one thing they never expected me to do. I didn't respond. I let the email sit there, unanswered, just like they had ignored me when I needed them most. And just like that, the last thread tying me to my past snapped. One night, months later, I found myself in a quiet hotel room, overlooking a city skyline. It was one of those rare moments when everything slowed down, and I had time to reflect. I thought about that cold, lonely night in my car, when I had almost given up. I thought about all the times I had struggled, all the times I had felt like a failure, all the times I had doubted myself. I thought about my father's laughter, my mother's dismissive sighs, my brother's smirk when he told me I'd never make it. And then I thought about where I was now. Successful. Respected. Happy. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to make them feel small. Because my success was enough. Walking away was enough. A year passed. Then 2. And I never heard from my family again. Not because I had disappeared, but because, deep down, they knew. They knew they had lost me. They knew I had no reason to come back. And for once in their lives, they had nothing to say. Years ago, I would have given anything to hear my family say, "We're proud of you." But now, I didn't need to hear it. Because I was proud of myself. I had built a life that was mine, free from their doubts, their judgments, their limitations. I had proven, not to them, but to myself, that I was capable of everything they said I couldn't do. And that was enough. As for my family, they became nothing more than a chapter in my past. A reminder of where I came from, but not where I was going. I had moved on. And I was never looking back.